here talking about climate change. We know it's coming. We know it's happening. And then we say, okay, we need to decarbonize. And decarbonize, it's all about mitigation. So mitigation, it's a big challenge. It's a big target that we had. And I will go down now because I prefer to move around. So mitigation, it's a big challenge that we have, right? So can we mitigate really to reach the levels that we need in order not to rise the temperatures beyond 1.5 or beyond 2 degrees Celsius? You have heard about the roadmaps. Agenda 2030, net zero by 2050. So is this really happening? Can we really manage it? So we heard from before about coolcationing. We heard a very good example now about the sustainable cruising and how it can happen. But the sector is very big. It's not only these individual examples that we have. It's that we are too many, we are too complex, and it's the coordination. It's a huge task. Before I introduce you the topic here, I would like to drop some numbers. Some numbers that will be easy numbers from our own experiences. Who from you here has been on a summer vacation this year? Please raise your hand. Okay, most of you. All right. I want to understand what is the threshold for you of a temperature being too hot during summer. I will say numbers, and then you raise your hand when I have reached your threshold, all right? So 25 degrees, 28 degrees, 30 degrees. Okay, some hands here. 32 degrees. Some more hands. 35 degrees. 38 degrees. 40 degrees. We don't have a winner, that's the problem. Hopefully we would have a winner, but this is not the case here. So here we have different thresholds of people about what is hot, right? How we can endure a destination experience when temperatures are too high. And please keep that in mind that we had varied responses here on what we consider being hot because it's part of the discussion. So, ICF, tourism and heat resilience. It's a combination that I never thought that I would do when I was studying. I don't know in your professional career if you ever thought that you will be working with climate scientists to see how rising temperatures will impact the tourism industry. It wasn't on my plan, but well, I'm working for a company that that is very much committed to climate response, and we have a climate center, and together we have developed this new service called Tourism and Heat Resilience. Before I go into explain how the service works and how you can benefit from it if you're a destination or if you're stakeholders, let's talk a little bit about the problem that we are facing. So the problem, all good? Yeah, you want me to go up? Okay, I'll go up. So, well, here I am again. I didn't want to be the spotlight. I want this to be the spotlight, but well, I'm invited to go up to the stage. So, okay, so what is the problem that we're facing here? Here we have as destination dealing with climate change. Organizations have called it climate emergency. A lot of regulations is happening. A lot of policy changes across the sectors, across our economy are happening. And our companies need to, of course, be compliant with these new regulations. And our destinations from a government perspective, from the public side, need to adapt and introduce new policies, new regulations that would make sense, that would be feasible, and that would create the pathway to transition in an orderly manner. This is not easy. This has created a lot of tensions between the private sector and the government sector. So, tourism. We want to take people experience destinations, right? We discussed before how people may change their habits from going to one place to the other just because of heat. But heat is impacting everything. It's not only making things too hot. It is impacting the product. So how about not being able to have ski resorts, and you will listen about it in the next panel, if I'm not mistaken. How about if we are not able to experience a summer holiday during summer? What we consider now summer might change completely, and if what we consider now summer changes, if it expands, and if the temperatures are too high for you to travel, then when do we travel? And time is very important in our industry. Availability of time is what makes tourism happen. So if we don't have availability of time, then what do we have? We have people who cannot travel because maybe they don't have holidays. Maybe August will not be the month of holiday. In France, it's a big thing, and I know. How about, like in 2050, this not being the case? So what we can do from ICF side is that we can do projections up to 2050 based on different scenarios on how the rising temperatures will evolve in a national level, in a regional level, in a very local level. And what I will present you here is a study that we did for Andalusia. So we will see some numbers. We will see some heat maps. I try to make it as easy as possible for me to be able to digest it, but so for you, because as I said, I'm not a climate scientist, but I'm a tourist professional, and I am requested to address the challenge here. So, the case of Andalusia, Spain. It's very weird for me to see Andalusia written in this form in English, because, of course, in Spanish it's with C. Let's go. Observed heat waves. What you will see now is, let's say, an average of the latest decades of how many heat waves we have seen in Andalusia and where. Now, by heat waves, we mean heat waves that lasted at least 3 days, and that are based on 2 different scenarios. Scenario number 1 has to do with our threshold of 38 degrees. Scenario number 2 has to do with a threshold of 40 degrees. So these scenarios called, these scenarios that you will see here, this is observed heat waves over 38 degrees. That is 3 days in a row of heat waves. How many of these we had in Andalusia? You see here the northern part, of course, and Seville were the most impacted, around Cordoba and around Sevilla. We see some orange down the coast, but not so much, right? And this is what we have seen up to now, based on the average temperatures the past decades. And here, even less of heat waves above 40 degrees. So this is our experience from the 80s up to today. How about we change a little bit the situation? I will use the first scenario that it's about 38 degrees. I won't go into the methodology, how this was calculated. And we will see the projections up to 2050. So 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1, if we manage to mitigate partially the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. This is what we'll have. This is what we'll have by 2050. You see a big change. So climate change is happening, rising temperatures are happening, and this is beyond 38. Who had 38 for threshold? You remember? OK, I see 1. That means most of you had even lower. And let's see here what happens with the worst scenario, which is this scenario is as if we were not able to mitigate the carbon emissions. Here you see the northern part being like too hot, experiencing about more than 6 heat waves during the year, and each heat wave lasting more than 3 days. And what is the case that we can see here for the next scenario, 40 degrees? So here, heat waves of 40 degrees, it's less, of course. And the same applies to the worst scenario. So we have a medium scenario where we are able to mitigate a little bit, and then we have a worst case scenario where we are not able to mitigate a lot. But still, it's going to be even worse, even at 40 degrees of what we had before. Let's go beyond the case of Andalusia, Spain, now on what we see during of these heat waves during the different times of the year, during the different periods. we see that observed is the blue column, the medium scenario is the orange column, and the worst case scenario is the green column. So we are going to see an increase in what we call today summer. We're going to see a huge increase of the rising temperatures. And here you see how many more heat waves we are going to experience. This is quite challenging. Water balance. Rising temperatures do not only come to heat waves, which of course they have their risks. It comes also with drought, and drought impacts our natural resources. It impacts our water reserves. So compared to what we have as a base year now, we will see the projections of water balance on 38 degrees and 40 degrees Celsius projections as we did before of rising temperatures. So here is what we expect to happen in the water balance that we have, in the water reserves, that means, due to drought by 2050 on the medium and on the high risk scenario. So tourist policy and strategy implications. All right, we saw what's happening, and here we have to be very careful with the messaging. The thing is that climate change is happening, and we need to adapt. Yes, absolutely. However, we have a solution. It's not all negative, and this is what I'm here to say. Here on the positive note, we have the time to adapt. And in order to adapt, we need to start now adapting towards what is happening by 2050. Climate change adaptation does not happen in an instant. We need to make sure that we take all the right phased approach steps in order to have our plan ready for implementation by 2050. So the ones who will be running our tourism sector in 2050 will have enjoyed all the different efforts that we have done before. So tourism and policy and strategy implications based on rising temperatures. So what we can say about what we expect to see, right? So here you have the 38 degrees and the 30 degrees Celsius. And here I have put the map of Seville as we see it from Google. Why I did that? For us to see all the other areas that will not so heavily be impacted. So please have a look in Granada, in all the small villages around, to identify that, hey, Andalusia will be impacted, but not the whole of Andalusia. And this is very important because it's linked to the policy that we need to do from now on as we adapt to it. So, which are what we can do about it? Adaptation to new seasonality patterns. We need to start preparing for the new seasonality that will come for our destination, for Andalusia in this case, and try to make sure that we build the right patterns, and that we study the right patterns and start marketing and operating tourism during the seasons that tourism will be viable and will not be too hot for travelers to enjoy. Redistribution of tourism flows. Within the region, you will have some areas that are heavily impacted. You will have some other areas that are not very heavily impacted. So this is an opportunity here to redistribute your tourism flows to these areas during that period of the year that will be too hot to enjoy. And this requires for you to have the tourist product and tourism experience and infrastructure in place to the new areas that will be receiving tourists. Product development in less impacted areas, and this is what I was talking to you about. Yep, have 9 seconds yet. Health measures and crisis preparedness. Recalibration of source markets and demographics. So we need to understand who are we attracting, and this is why I asked you before, who feels that it's too hot, in which degree, because the ones who feel that it's too hot beyond 38 degrees or beyond 40, then maybe you are the ones to attract first because you're more resistant to heat. Tailoring the tourist marketing, indoors versus outdoors activities. We need to start thinking about indoors activities during this high heat. Roadmap for heat resilience tourist policy. And finally, update the regional strategy. And this is what we all call the HEART action plan. So HEART from heat resilience and tourism, and it's the action plan that you need to take as a region in order to adapt to the rising temperatures. And here I finish with my presentation. Thank you very much.